my daughter's lie about my husband walking in on her. Now, our marriage was destroyed beyond repair. I'm 35. I never imagined my life would spiral into this kind of chaos. Looking back now, that Thursday evening feels like a dream, or rather, a nightmare that I can't wake up from. My husband, David, and I had been married for just over 5 years, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly loved and respected. David wasn't just a good husband to me, he brought light back into our lives when Maggie and I needed it most. After my divorce, we'd both felt so lost, just trying to make it through each day. But then David came along, and everything changed. He never tried to force his way into Maggie's life or replace her father. Instead, he was just there. There to help when her car broke down on the way to class. There to listen when she worried about choosing her major. There to celebrate when she made the dean's list. At 19, Maggie needed guidance, not a replacement dad, and David understood that perfectly. He found that delicate balance between being supportive and giving her space to find her own way. I remember telling my sister Marie just months ago, "You know, I really hit the jackpot with David. The way he treats Maggie, it's more than I could have hoped for." "You deserve it," she replied. "After everything with John, you deserve someone who treats you both right." I'd never picked up on anything inappropriate between them, and Maggie never expressed any discomfort or concerns. If anything, she seemed grateful to have a stable male figure in her life. But everything changed that Thursday evening. We were watching a movie in the living room, some action film David had picked. The three of us were sprawled across the couch, sharing popcorn and making casual commentary about the plot holes. "I'm going to use the bathroom," David announced during a slower scene, getting up from his spot between us. I barely registered his departure, too caught up in the movie. But moments later, I heard two distinct knocks, followed by screaming that made my blood run cold. "Get it out! Get out!" Maggie's voice echoed through the house. I jumped up, my heart pounding, and rushed toward the bathroom. David was stumbling backward, his face ashen, while Maggie, wrapped in a towel and clearly distraught, continued yelling. "What happened?" I demanded, looking between them. "What's going on?" David held up his hands, his voice shaking. "I knocked. I swear I knocked." There was no answer, so I thought. "He didn't knock," Maggie interrupted, clutching her towel tighter. "He just walked in." "Everyone just calm down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maggie, honey, were you wearing your earphones?" There was a pause, and I saw realization dawn on her face. She reached up and pulled out her wireless earbuds, the ones she always wore while showering. "Oh," she said quietly. I didn't hear." David's shoulders sagged with relief. "I'm so sorry, Maggie. I really did knock. I would never intentional." "No, I'm sorry," Maggie cut in, her voice smaller now. "I was listening to music. I shouldn't have screamed at you." They hugged awkwardly, and I thought that would be the end of it. Just an unfortunate misunderstanding that we could laugh about later. The next morning I was making coffee when my phone started buzzing incessantly. First Marie, then my mother, then my cousins, all calling and texting with increasing urgency. "How could you let this happen?" Marie's voice crackled through the speaker when I finally answered. "What kind of mother are you?" "What are you talking about? Your husband." Turns out, Maggie told Marie's daughter, Jessica, David walked in on her in the bathroom deliberately. That he's been making her uncomfortable for months. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. "He what?" "No. That's not what happened at all. There was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? Wake up. Your daughter is terrified." I ended the call and immediately went to find Maggie. She was in her room, scrolling through her phone with a troubled expression. "Maggie," I said, my voice stern. "What did you tell Jessica?" She looked up, startled. "Nothing. I mean, I just mentioned what happened." "Really?" "Because according to Aunt Marie, you told her daughter that David deliberately walked in on you, that he's been making you uncomfortable for months. Is that true?" Maggie's face crumpled. "No, we were texting, and Jessica asked if anything weird had happened lately, and I told her about the bathroom thing, but I didn't say all that." "Show me the texts." She hesitated before handing over her phone. The conversation with Jessica was worse than I'd imagined. Maggie had left out crucial details, making it sound like David had ignored her response when he knocked, and she'd added vague comments about weird vibes as that had never been mentioned before. "Why would you do this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You know that's not what happened." I didn't think Jessica would tell anyone else. She just kept asking questions, and I got caught up in the conversation, and before she could finish, we heard the front door slam. David walked into the room, his face drawn and tired. "I just got called into HR," he said quietly. Multiple people, called my workplace with accusations about me being inappropriate with my stepdaughter." Maggie's face went white. "What? No, I didn't. I never meant." "I know you didn't mean for this to happen," David cut in, his voice carefully controlled. "But it has happened, and now I have to deal with the consequences of something I didn't do." He turned to me, and I could see the pain in his eyes. "I'm going to stay with my parents for a few days. I need space to think." "David, please," I started, but he was already heading to our bedroom to pack a bag. Maggie followed him, tears streaming down her face. "David, I'm so sorry. I'll tell everyone the truth. I'll fix this." He stopped and turned to face her. "Will you? Because right now, your cousin and our entire family think I'm some kind of predator. Even if you tell the truth now, how many of them will believe you were forced to change your story? How many will always look at me with suspicion?" The next few days were a nightmare. David returned briefly on Friday to discuss our situation, but it wasn't the conversation I'd hoped for. "I want a divorce," he said simply, sitting at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared countless family meals. "No," I whispered. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Can we?" He pulled out his phone and showed me the messages he'd received. "Threats, accusations, vile names. Your family has already decided what kind of person I am. Even if Maggie tells the truth now, there will always be doubts. I can't live like that." What if I hesitated? What if Maggie moved out? What if we moved away from here, started fresh? He shook his head. "No, that's not fair. I'd never ask you to choose between your child and me. And if you did choose me, I don't think I could respect that decision. The only solution is to end this now." Maggie, who had been listening from the hallway, burst into the room. "Please don't leave because of me. I'll record a video right now, telling everyone what really happened." David held up his phone. "I'm recording this conversation because that's what my life has become now. I can't have any private conversations with my family without documenting everything to protect myself." Maggie broke down completely then, admitting between sobs how she'd embellished the story while texting with Jessica, how she'd never meant for it to escalate, how she'd thought people would just forget about it because everyone knows you're not like that. David played the recording of her confession for my family, but as he predicted, the damage was done. Some suggested we had coerced her into recanting. Others apologized, but their words rang hollow after their rush to judgment. He gave us 3 months to move out of his house, the house he'd owned before our marriage. He promised to finish paying Maggie's tuition for the year and let her keep the car he'd given her for her birthday. But beyond that, he was done. "I loved you," he told me on his final night in the house. "I still love you. But I can't stay in a situation where one misunderstanding, one moment of bad judgment by a teenager, can destroy everything I've worked for. I'm sorry." Now, weeks later, I'm still trying to process how quickly everything fell apart. Maggie has cleared up the rumors with our family, but she's struggling with guilt and depression. I've blocked most of my family's numbers. Their apologies mean nothing after they so readily believed the worst about the man I love. David won't see me anymore. His lawyer handles all communication. The man who used to kiss me goodbye every morning now treats me like a potential threat. "Mom," Maggie said to me last night, her voice small in the darkness of our living room. "Do you hate me?" "No, honey," I replied, pulling her close. "I don't hate you. I wish you had understood the power of words before you used them so carelessly. I don't know how to fix this. The trust is broken, not just between David and me, but between me and my family, between Maggie and herself. All I can do is take things day by day, hoping that somewhere in this mess, there's a lesson that will make us all better people. But for now, I'm left with the bitter knowledge that sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we tell without thinking, and the deepest wounds are the ones we inflict on the people we love most.
My ex-wife demanded half of my lottery winnings after leaving me broke in our divorce. But this time, she got nothing. I am 39, looking back on how winning the lottery exposed my ex-wife's true colors. Not that I needed much convincing after what she'd already put me through. I still remember the day I discovered her affair. It was one evening in March, and I'd come home early from work with takeout from her favorite dessert, hoping to surprise her. Instead, I was the one who got surprised. The signs had been there for months, the late nights at work, the mysterious text messages, her growing emotional distance. But nothing prepares you for finding your wife of 8 years in your own bed with her just a friend from the gym. The next few months were a blur of pain and betrayal. Cindy, my ex-wife, didn't even have the decency to act remorseful. Instead, she turned it around on me, claiming I'd been emotionally unavailable and that I drove her to it. The worst part? She'd been planning her exit strategy for months, quietly moving money from our joint accounts into her personal one, building a nest egg while systematically destroying ours. The divorce was brutal. Her lawyer was a shark in an expensive suit, and she'd somehow convinced the judge that she deserved the lion's share of our assets because she'd supported my career. Never mind that I was the one working overtime to maintain our lifestyle while she was finding herself at yoga retreats and apparently in our bedroom with her instructor. I lost almost everything. Our house gone, my savings decimated. Even my prized collection of vintage vinyl records, which she'd always hated, somehow ended up in her possession, probably sitting in some dusty storage unit now. Those first few months post-divorce were some of the darkest of my life. I'd wake up each morning feeling like I was underwater, struggling to breathe, wondering how I'd let someone take so much from me, not just materially, but emotionally too. I started working 2 jobs, my regular position at the logistics company during the day and bartending at night. Every dollar I earned felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming my independence. Then came that fateful day at the gas station. I'd stopped to fill up my beaten-down car, the only car I could afford after the divorce, and on a whim bought a lottery ticket. I remember joking with the cashier about how this one's gonna be it, the way people always do. The ticket went into my jacket pocket, and I honestly forgot about it for days. I was having my morning coffee, half watching the local news while getting ready for work when they announced the winning numbers. Something made me pause. The numbers sounded familiar. I dug through my jacket pockets, found the crumpled ticket, and nearly spilled coffee all over myself. The numbers matched, all of them. The next few weeks were a crash course in how to handle sudden wealth. I did everything right this time. Hired a top-notch attorney who specialized in lottery winners, kept my mouth shut about the win, and took steps to protect my identity as much as legally possible. The amount wasn't headline-making billions, but it was enough millions to change my life completely if handled correctly. I moved methodically, deliberately, paid off my debts, bought a modest but comfortable house in a nice neighborhood, set up investment accounts, made some charitable donations to causes I cared about, and generally tried to be smart about it. The whole time I kept thinking about how Cindy would react if she knew. But she was out of my life, and I intended to keep it that way. 3 peaceful years passed. I'd found a rhythm to my new life, made new friends, even started dating again casually. Then came that phone call. "Hey, stranger," her voice dripped with fake sweetness, the same tone she'd used when trying to convince me that those late-night texts were just work stuff. My stomach clenched. "Cindy, why are you calling? Can't an old friend check in, see how you're doing?" She paused for effect. "I hear you're doing quite well these days." My blood ran cold. Someone had talked. In a town this size, it was probably inevitable that word would eventually get back to her. I kept my voice neutral. "I'm fine. What do you want?" She danced around it for a while, reminiscing about the good times, claiming she'd been thinking about me lately. Finally, she got to the point. "So, when were you going to tell me about the lottery win?" "I wasn't," I replied flatly. "We're divorced. My financial situation is none of your business." She laughed, that familiar condescending laugh that used to make my skin crawl. "Oh, honey, we were married for 8 years. Don't you think I deserve to share in your good fortune?" I hung up. But Cindy wasn't done, not by a long shot. A week passed, and my phone lit up with her number again. My stomach clenched as I debated whether to answer. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I knew Cindy, she'd just keep calling until I picked up. What now? I answered, not bothering to hide my irritation. Hey! Her voice was softer this time, almost vulnerable. I recognized this tactic. She'd used it countless times during our marriage when she wanted something. Can we meet for coffee? I've been doing a lot of thinking. I let out a heavy sigh. I think we said everything we needed to say last time. Please. There was a tremor in her voice that would have once tugged at my heartstrings. Things haven't been. I just need to talk to you. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at a coffee shop, neutral territory, public enough that she couldn't make a scene. When I arrived, she was already there. I've been thinking about us, she started, her eyes downcast. About how things ended, maybe if we'd tried harder. I cut her off. There is no us, Cindy. You made sure of that when you slept with your trainer in our bed. She flinched but pressed on. I know I made mistakes, huge ones, but life hasn't been kind since then. I lost my job at the firm last month. She paused, likely waiting for me to express sympathy. When I didn't, she continued, I'm behind on my mortgage, my car payment. The performance was almost impressive. Her voice cracked at just the right moments, her eyes welling up with tears that didn't quite fall, but I'd seen this show before. And then, she continued, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, I heard about your lottery win. It felt like maybe it was a sign, a chance for us to start over. I couldn't help but laugh, which made her jump. A sign? The only sign here is that you haven't changed a bit. You're still looking for someone to bail you out. Her expression shifted, the vulnerable facade cracking. I gave you 8 years of my life, she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. I supported you while you built your career. I deserve. You deserve? I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but intense. Let's talk about what you deserve. You cheated on me, gaslit me for months, then took everything in the divorce. You left me sleeping on a friend's couch while you lived in our house with your boyfriend, the same boyfriend who didn't work out. Color flooded her cheeks. That's not. The lottery ticket was bought, and 1 year after you destroyed our marriage. I cut in. Years after you cleared out our joint accounts. Years after you convinced the judge that you deserved most of our assets because you'd supported my career, the same career you called boring and beneath you. The tears were gone now, replaced by something colder. We'll see about that, she said, gathering her designer bag. I gave you the best years of my life, and I deserve half of everything you have. My lawyer will be in touch. As she stood to leave, I called after her. You already took half of everything I had once, Cindy. Lightning's not going to strike twice. She paused at the door, shooting me a look that was pure venom. Don't be so sure about that. Watching her storm out, I felt a mixture of anger and pity. She was still the same person who'd torn my life apart 3 years ago, just with a different target in sight. But this time, I wasn't the broken man she'd left behind. This time, I was ready for her. What followed was a legal nightmare. She actually found a lawyer willing to take her case, trying to argue that the lottery winnings were somehow connected to our marriage. They filed papers claiming I had concealed assets during the divorce, suggesting I had won the lottery earlier and hidden it. It was completely fabricated, but we still had to go to court. The day of the hearing was surreal. Cindy showed up in a conservative blue dress, playing the part of the devoted ex-wife who'd simply fallen on hard times. She'd even styled her hair the same way she had during our divorce proceedings, the innocent victim look she'd perfected. Her performance on the stand was Oscar-worthy. She wept about how she'd supported me through thick and thin, conveniently leaving out the part about her affair. She claimed she'd given me money for lottery tickets during our marriage, implying some connection to my winning ticket. When pressed for dates, she grew vague, saying through tears that she couldn't remember exactly but was certain it was before our divorce was final. My attorney systematically destroyed her claims. He produced the lottery ticket purchase date, the claiming documentation, bank records showing the deposit, all well after our divorce was final. When Cindy tried to argue that she'd contributed to my ability to buy the ticket, the judge asked her pointed questions about our divorce settlement. Mrs. Harrison, the judge said, consulting the documents, according to these records, you received 70% of the marital assets in the divorce, is that correct? Cindy squirmed. Yes, but... And Mr. Thompson was left with significant debt after the divorce. He had a good job. Please answer the question, Mrs. Harrison. Yes, she admitted reluctantly. The judge's patience visibly thinned as Cindy tried to spin more tailies. When she claimed she'd given me specific money for lottery tickets, My attorney produced bank records showing she'd actually withdraw large sums from our joint account for herself during that period. Her lies began to unravel. The case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile. The judge even warned her about bringing frivolous lawsuits and suggested she might want to think carefully before trying anything similar in the future. I thought that would be the end of it. But Cindy wasn't done. She cornered me outside the courtroom, her mascara smeared from crying, but her eyes were hard as steel. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are, how you left me with nothing." I couldn't help but laugh. "Nothing, you took everything in the divorce, you cheated on me, emptied our accounts, and still played the victim, and now you're trying it again." "I deserved better than you," she spat. "I still do. You deserve exactly what you got today, nothing." In the weeks that followed, true to her word, she tried to smear my name around town. She told anyone who would listen that I'd somehow cheated her, that I'd hidden money during our divorce, that I was miserly and cruel. But people had seen through her act in court, and they saw through it now. The few mutual friends we still shared told me she'd been calling them, crying about how unfair it all was. Some even admitted they'd known about her affair back then, but had been too uncomfortable to tell me. Now, watching her try to play the victim again, they felt guilty for ever believing her side of the story. I heard through the grapevine that she'd had to pay her lawyers substantial fees out of pocket, since they'd taken the case on the promise of a percentage of the settlement, a settlement that never came. The irony wasn't lost on me that she'd ended up losing money trying to take mine. It's been 6 months since the court case. I've moved on with my life, still living modestly despite my wealth. I donate to domestic abuse shelters and organizations that help people rebuild their lives after divorce, something that feels meaningful given my experience. I've even started seeing someone new, though I'm taking it very slowly and being much more careful about protecting myself. Cindy still tries to contact me occasionally, usually when she's been drinking. The messages swing between angry accusations and tearful apologies, with the occasional attempt at manipulation thrown in. I keep them all documented with my lawyer, just in case, but I never respond. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have gone if she'd been honest from the start, both during our marriage and after the lottery win. If she'd shown any real remorse for the affair, if she'd been fair in the divorce, if she'd just lived her life instead of trying to take more of mine. But that's not who she is. The lottery didn't change her character, it just revealed it more clearly. I won't pretend I don't feel a certain satisfaction in how things turned out. There's something poetic about how her greed and dishonesty finally caught up with her in such a public way. But mostly, I'm just grateful. Grateful that I survived the darkness after our divorce. Grateful that I was smart about handling the lottery money. And most of all, grateful that when she came back trying to take more from me, I was strong enough to stand my ground. They say living well is the best revenge. I don't know about that. But I do know that watching someone who hurt you so deeply fails in their attempt to hurt you again, well, that feels pretty good too. I'm not the same man she left broke and broken 3 years ago. I'm stronger now, wiser, and finally free of the last bits of guilt and self-doubt she'd left me with. As for Cindy, last I heard, she's telling anyone who will listen that she's writing a book about her experience with a vindictive ex-husband. Somehow, I doubt it'll be a bestseller. The truth has a way of coming out, and her version of events has more holes in it than a lottery ticket that didn't win.
My ex-wife came crawling back after I inherited my dad's fortune. But I moved on. I'm 36, recently divorced, and somehow managing to juggle raising 2 kids while running a business I never wanted. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, but let me start from the beginning because there's quite a story to tell. My father built his merchandising business from nothing but grit and determination. He wasn't just successful. He was the kind of successful that turns heads at charity galas. The kind of success that men our family name open doors throughout the city. The kind that lets you send your kid to any college they want, drive luxury cars, and still have enough left over to donate buildings to the local hospital. But like many self-made men, he had dreams of passing his legacy onto his only son. That's me. The thing is, I had different plans. While he saw suits, board meetings, and quarterly reports in my future, I saw lines of code and the endless possibilities of technology. I was the kid who took apart computers just to see how they worked, who stayed up late teaching myself programming languages while my friends were out partying. My room looked like a Radio Shack had exploded, with circuit boards and cables everywhere. Mom used to joke that she needed a map just to vacuum in there. When college application time came around, I chose a computer science degree instead of business school. The fight that followed was epic. Dad couldn't understand why I'd want to waste my potential playing with computers when I could be learning to run a real business. Mom played peacekeeper, as usual, convincing him to at least let me try my way. Dad was disappointed, sure, but he held out hope that I'd come to my senses after graduation. He figured once I saw what the corporate world was really like, I'd come running back to take over the family business. But that's not what happened. Instead, I landed a job at a major tech company and thrived. By 29, I had my own house in a nice neighborhood, a new car in the driveway, and a career that made me excited to get up every morning. I didn't need his money. I was building my own life, my own way. That's when things really went south. Dad gave me one final ultimatum: join the business or be cut out of the will entirely. The argument that followed shook the house. I told him I didn't need his money, that I was doing fine on my own. He called me ungrateful, said I was spitting on everything he'd built. I chose my passion, and he chose to give everything to charity. Our relationship hit rock bottom. Then Mom died. It wasn't gradual. There was no time to prepare. One minute she was planning Sunday dinner. The next she was gone. Massive heart attack while gardening. It's funny how death has a way of putting things in perspective. Dad had always been larger than life. The successful businessman, the community leader, the man who always knew what to do. But after Mom's heart attack, I saw him for what he really was: a lonely old man who just lost his best friend. The big house he'd been so proud of suddenly seemed to swallow him whole. That's when things started to change between us. I began visiting more often, bringing my kids to see their grandfather. My daughter, Sarah, has his eyes, that same mischievous twinkle when she's up to something. And my son, James, inherited his stubborn chin and unwavering determination. Watching them together, it was like seeing pieces of Mom and Dad come back to life. Dad stepped back from the business, letting a trust handle operations while he focused on being a grandpa. He taught the kids card tricks, told them stories about the old days, and spoiled them rotten with ice cream before dinner. All the things Mom would have scolded him for. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and Dad's health started failing. His kidneys were giving out, and he needed dialysis twice a week. I stepped up without hesitation, arranging my work schedule to take him every Wednesday and Saturday. My boss was understanding. 10 years of loyalty earns you some flexibility. I'd leave early on Wednesdays, make up the work at night, and use my Saturdays to help Dad through his treatments. That's when my wife, Emma, showed her true colors. She'd never been Dad's biggest fan, especially after he cut me out of the will. But when I started taking him to dialysis regularly, she completely lost it. Every Wednesday and Saturday became a battleground. She deliberately planned events I couldn't miss, leave me alone with the kids when I had work to finish, or pick fights that would last into the early hours of the morning. "Why are you wasting time on him?" she'd demand, hands on her hips, that familiar look of contempt crossing her face. "He cut you off. He doesn't care about you. He's just manipulating you again." But that's not how family works. You don't abandon your father just because he's not leaving you any money. You don't walk away when someone needs you just because there's nothing in it for you. I yelled back. Those twice-weekly drives to dialysis became precious time together. We talked about everything and nothing: his childhood, my work, Mom's terrible cooking that we both pretended to love. Sometimes we just sat in comfortable silence, two stubborn men finally learning to understand each other. I tried explaining this to Emma, but she couldn't or wouldn't understand. Her own family treated relationships like business transactions, always keeping score of who owed what to whom. Maybe that's why she couldn't comprehend doing something simply because it was right. The final straw came when Dad's condition worsened. He could barely walk anymore, needing support just to get from his bed to the car. I started taking more time with him, making sure he was comfortable, driving slower to avoid jarring his fragile body. This meant I was getting home later, and Emma's patience ran out. "Choose," she said one night, standing in our bedroom doorway with her arms crossed. "Him or me?" My response was immediate. Him. The look of shock on her face would have been comical if it wasn't so sad. She honestly thought I'd choose her manipulative behavior over my dying father. She packed her bags that night, slamming drawers and muttering under her breath about how I'd regret this. A few days later, divorce papers arrived. To my surprise and relief, she didn't want custody of the kids. Her mother later told me Emma was too young to be tied down with children. Some mother, right? The woman who'd cried through both pregnancies about how blessed she was to have children was now abandoning them without a second thought. That's when I made the best decision of my life. I moved the kids and myself into Dad's house. He had a full-time caregiver who was happy to help with the children and watching him play with his grandkids. I hadn't seen him that happy since before Mom died. It was like everything had fallen into place. The kids thrived in the big old house. Sarah claimed Mom's old sewing room as her art studio, covering the walls with drawings of our family, always including Dad in his favorite armchair. James took over the garden, determined to finish planting those roses that Mom never got to. My dad supervised from his wheelchair, offering advice and stories about Mom's green thumb. Then, last week, Dad passed away in his sleep. The doctor said he went peacefully, content after spending the evening playing cards with his grandchildren. It hurt, God, but knowing his final months were filled with joy made it easier to bear. That's when the real bombshell dropped. The lawyer called me in to read the will, and I almost didn't go. What was the point? Dad had given everything to charity, right? Wrong. It turns out I had been his heir all along. He never changed the will, never cut me off. It had all been a bluff, his last attempt to get me to join the family business. The lawyer told me Dad was actually proud of me for sticking to my guns, for choosing passion over money. He respected that I built my own success instead of riding his coattails. Your father told me it was the moment he knew you'd be all right, the lawyer said. That you had the strength to stand up for what you believed in, even against him. Now I own it all. The business, the house, everything. And guess who showed up at my door as soon as the news got out? Emma. She came crying about how much she missed the kids, how we should reconcile for their sake. When I refused, the tears dried up pretty quick. Now she's threatening to sue for half of everything, claiming she deserves a share of Dad's wealth. But her chances were slim. We divorced before the inheritance, and she gave up custody of the kids. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who criticized my father's manipulation was now trying to manipulate her way into his fortune. But I learned from the best about standing my ground and fighting for what matters. Dad taught me that even when I thought he was pushing me away. After that, I ran Dad's company. Turns out business isn't so bad when you can bring a tech perspective to it. Raised two amazing kids and honored the legacy of a man who taught me more than I ever realized. The house was full of memories. My childhood, Mom's cooking, Dad teaching the kids card tricks from his hospital bed. We stayed here, in the heart of everything he built. I took the kids to the Bahamas last month, our first real vacation in years. Sitting on that beach, watching them play in the waves, I couldn't help but think about Dad. He would have loved this, would have been right there building sandcastles with them. James collected seashells, insisting we bring some back to put on Grandpa's grave. Sarah wrote, "We love you, Grandpa," in the sand, and made me take a picture before the tide came in. Sometimes the biggest inheritances aren't measured in dollars and cents. Sometimes they're measured in the lessons we learn, the strength we find, and the love that survives even when everything else falls apart. Dad taught me that success isn't about the money you make or the things you own. It's about the legacy you leave behind. That's my father's real legacy. Not the business or the house or the money in the bank. It's the love he showed us, the values he instilled, and the family he brought together, even after he was gone. And no amount of legal threats or manipulative tears can take that away. As for Emma, let her try to get what she wants. I've got something worth far more than money. A family that stands together, memories that can't be bought, and the knowledge that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the best destinations. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one. My date scammed me into paying for the lavish dinner. So, I exposed her scheme and left her with the bill. I'm 27. I never thought I'd find myself in a standoff over a dinner bill on a first date, but looking back now, it was probably the worst disaster that could have happened to me. Let me tell you how I ended up dodging what could have been a much bigger bullet. It started like most modern love stories do, with a dating app match. Her name was Nancy, and our initial conversations were everything you'd hope for when meeting someone new. We shared the same taste in music, both huge fans of indie rock, laughed at the same memes, and had this easy back and forth that made me think, hey, maybe this time it'll be different. After chatting for a week, we decided to meet at Sullivan's, this mid-range steakhouse downtown. Nothing too fancy, but nice enough for a first date. I arrived 15 minutes early, wanting to make a good impression. The hostess led me to a cozy table by the window, and I remember thinking how perfect it was for getting to know someone. I just settled in when my phone buzzed. Running a bit late. Be there soon. No problem, I thought. These things happen. What her message didn't mention was that she'd be bringing an entire entourage. 30 minutes later, I looked up to see Nancy walking in with 3 people trailing behind her like a small parade. 2 women and a guy, all dressed like they were heading to a nightclub opening rather than a casual dinner. My stomach dropped, but I tried to keep my face neutral as they approached. Hey, Nancy chirped, as if this was completely normal. These are my friends, Katie, Madison, and Jake. They were free tonight and wanted to join us. Hope that's cool. I must have looked like a deer in headlights because Katie quickly added, don't worry, we don't bite, while Madison and Jake snickered behind her. Oh, sure, I managed, while internally screaming, what the actual hell? The hostess, bless her heart, tried to hide her surprise as she moved us to a larger booth. As we settled in, Nancy's friends immediately took control of the conversation, firing questions at me like I was at a job interview, like what I did, where I lived, what kind of car I drove. I answered politely while watching them order cocktails like they were at an open bar. Nancy barely made eye contact with me, too busy giggling with her friends about some inside jokes I couldn't follow. The red flags were now practically doing a synchronized dance routine in front of me. Then came the kicker. Nancy leaned over, batted her eyelashes, and purred, don't worry about the bill. We'll pay you back in good company. Her friends exchanged knowing looks that made my skin crawl. I excused myself to take a phone call and stepped outside for some air. That's when I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Through the partially open window near their table, I caught Nancy's voice. Don't worry, babe, she was saying to Jake, who I'd assumed was just a friend. He doesn't suspect a thing. Once he pays for dinner, I'll ghost him like all the others. My whole body went cold, then hot with anger, then eerily calm with the clarity of knowing exactly what I needed to do. I walked back in, grabbed my jacket from the booth, and said with perfect politeness, I need to settle my portion of the bill. I'll be right back. Their faces lit up until they realized I'd said my portion. I went to the hostess station and asked to pay for exactly what I'd ordered. 1 beer and a steak that hadn't even arrived yet. The look of sheer panic on their faces when I returned to say goodbye was almost worth the awkward evening. Wait, what? Nancy sputtered. You can't just leave. Actually, I can. And I am. Enjoy your dinner, the one you're paying for yourselves. The aftermath was like watching a drama unfold on social media. First came the angry texts. Nancy, I can't believe you embarrassed me like that. What kind of man are you? Katie, you're such a cheapskate. Who doesn't pay for dinner? Madison, we wasted our whole evening on this loser. I responded once. You tried to scam me into paying for an expensive dinner for 4 uninvited guests. That's not a date, that's a con job. Then I posted the video I'd recorded of Nancy's conversation with Jake. PSA, watch out for this dating app scam. They target guys for expensive group dinners then ghost them. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Nancy's friends launched a social media campaign claiming I was abusive and cheap, but it backfired when other guys came forward with similar stories about her group's dining scams. A week later, Nancy showed up at my workplace, tears streaming down her face. My coworkers watched with fascination as she begged for a second chance. Please, she pleaded. I was stupid. My friends put me up to it. Can we talk? Against my better judgment, I agreed to a 5-minute conversation on a bench outside. I've never been so embarrassed, she said, dabbing at her eyes. The video went viral in our social circle. Everyone's talking about it. I lost friends over this. That's what you're upset about? I asked. Being caught? Not what you did. No. I mean, yes, I'm upset about being caught, but I realize now how wrong it was. Can we start over? A real date? Just us? I studied her face, remembering how excited I'd been about our initial chats. You know what's interesting? I said finally. You're still not actually sorry for trying to scam me. You're sorry you got caught and exposed. There's a difference. That's not true. It is true. And here's the thing. I don't need a second chance to know who you are. You showed me perfectly clearly the first time. The aftermath continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Nancy's scam group eventually fell apart. Turns out recording their scheme and posting it online made it harder to find new targets. Who knew? Jake, her supposed boyfriend, reached out to me a month later. Hey man, I know this is weird, but I wanted to apologize. We used to pull this stunt a lot. Nancy would match with guys. We'd all show up, rack up a huge bill, then ghost them. It was messed up. Seeing it from the outside finally made me realize how pathetic we were. I appreciated his honesty but kept my response brief. Thanks for owning up to it. Hope you've found better ways to spend your evenings. The whole experience changed how I approach dating. I'm more cautious now, but also more confident in setting boundaries. When I match with someone new, I'm clear about expectations up front. First dates are coffee or casual drinks. No expensive dinners until I know someone better. Some people called me petty for exposing Nancy's scheme online, but I disagree. Sometimes public accountability is the only way to stop predatory behavior. Besides, I might have saved some other guys from falling for the same scam. 6 months later, I ran into Katie at a local coffee shop. She quickly averted her eyes and hurried out, leaving her half-finished latte behind. I couldn't help but smile. Amazing how the tables turn when scammers realize they can't hide behind anonymity anymore. Nancy made one final attempt at contact around the holidays, sending a long email about how she'd changed and grown from the experience. She even offered to pay me back for the partial bill I'd covered that night. I marked it as spam without replying. Some lessons in life cost more than a dinner bill, and I had a feeling she was still learning hers. The video continued to ripple through our local dating scene. A local news website even picked up the story, though they kept names anonymous, running a piece about dating app scams and how to avoid them. I was interviewed for the article, and the reporter revealed that similar schemes had been reported in other cities. More guys came forward with their stories about Nancy and her friends. The pattern was always the same. Match on the app, great conversation, then suddenly a group dinner that turned into an expensive nightmare. One guy had actually paid for their entire meal, over $800, only to be blocked on all platforms the next day. One of Nancy's friends reached out about 2 months after the incident. She seemed genuinely remorseful. What we were doing was really messed up, she wrote. I got caught up in thinking it was just harmless fun, like we were getting one over on these guys who could afford it. But watching that video of Nancy and Jake planning it out, it made me realize how calculated and cruel we were being. She went on to explain how their little scam group had started. It began as a joke, actually. Nancy and Jake had been dating for a while, and one night we all ended up joining their dinner date unexpectedly. The guy paid for everyone without complaining, and Nancy realized we could make this work for us. Jake would pretend to be just a friend. Nancy would match with guys who seemed well off, and we'd all get free expensive dinners out of it. We thought we were so clever. The more I learned about their operation, the more disturbing it became. They had a whole system. Nancy would scan dating profiles for certain jobs or indicators of income. Jake would research the guys on social media to make sure they were good targets, and Katie would keep a spreadsheet of restaurants they hadn't hit yet. They even had code words and signals during the dinners. If Nancy touched her earring, it meant the guy seemed like he might not pay and they should order less. If she adjusted her necklace, it was a green light to order the expensive stuff. Nancy's final attempt at contact came during the holidays through a mutual friend. She'd apparently gone through some personal growth and wanted to make amends. She sent a long letter. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that night changed everything for me. After the video went viral, I lost friends, got recognized at bars, and had to deal with the consequences of my actions for the first time. My own mother saw it and was horrified. She raised me better than that. Jake and I broke up. Turns out a relationship built on scamming others isn't very stable. I've been in therapy, working on why I thought it was okay to treat people like walking ATMs. I know you probably don't care about any of this, but I need you to know that you posting that video might have been the wake-up call I needed. I never responded to the letter, but I did hear through the grapevine that she'd gotten a job as a waitress at a high-end restaurant, ironically experiencing the other side of dinner service. Apparently, she's become known for warning customers about potential scams and watching out for similar groups trying to take advantage of unsuspecting dates. The experience changed how I approach dating in several ways. First, I always meet for coffee or drinks on first dates, no exceptions. Second, I trust my gut when something feels off. And third, I'm not afraid to stand up for myself when someone tries to take advantage. I've even started a small support group for guys who've been victims of dating scams. We meet monthly, share stories, and help each other recognize red flags. It's surprising how many different variations of these scams exist, from dinner schemes to fake emergencies needing cash. These days, when I tell the story at gatherings, people often ask if I regret posting the video. My answer is always the same. Nope. Sometimes the best way to deal with toxic behavior is to shine a light on it. The dating scene can be tough enough without having to worry about dinner scams and ghost groups. If my experience helps someone else avoid the same situation, then that awkward night at Sullivan's was worth every uncomfortable minute. My friends still tease me about being the guy who exposed the dinner scammers, but I wear that badge with pride. It's better than being known as the guy who got stuck with an $800 bill for a fake date. Last week, I finally went back to Sullivan's, on a proper date with someone I've been seeing for a few months. As we walked in, I caught the hostess giving me a knowing smile. When the bill came, my date insisted on splitting it evenly. I saw that viral video about the dinner scammers, she said with a grin. Made quite an impression on me. I always make sure to be clear about expectations now. I couldn't help but laugh. Well, at least some good came out of it. And you know what? The steak was definitely worth the wait. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one. My dad threw me out to make space for his perfect son, but now they're begging me to take the blame for his crime. Or they'll face prison. I'm 25, male, and my family's always been a disaster. My parents divorced when I was about 10. It was messy, and I mostly stayed with my mom after that. But my dad remarried when I was 12, and suddenly I had a new stepmom, Dee, and her son, T. T was 6 years younger than me, so when we first met, he was just a little kid. And honestly, I didn't mind him at first. I figured it was just another adjustment I'd have to deal with, but as the years went on, it became really clear that things weren't fair. T was always the favorite. He could do no wrong, even when he messed up. And believe me, he messed up a lot. It was always excused. If I did something wrong, it was a huge deal. My dad would yell, ground me, lecture me for hours. But T, he'd get a pat on the head and told to do better next time. It didn't take long for me to realize that no matter what I did, I'd always come second to T. I spent most of my teenage years keeping my head down, just trying to get through it. By the time I was 18, I couldn't wait to move out. I went off to college, worked 2 jobs to support myself, and barely spoke to my dad and his new family. I didn't need the constant reminder that I wasn't good enough for them, and honestly, I thought that was that. I figured I'd keep my distance, and eventually they'd fade out of my life for good. But about a year ago, everything blew up. I had been living on my own for a couple of years, working full-time, and finally starting to feel like I had my life together. Out of nowhere, I got a call from my dad. It was weird because we hadn't spoken much in months, but I picked up, thinking maybe something had happened. He said, in this tone that immediately put me on edge. It wasn't the usual friendly, "Have you been call?" No, this sounded serious. "Listen, we need to talk." That's when he dropped the bombshell. T had dropped out of college and was living back at home. Apparently, he'd blown through his savings, wasn't working, and was just hanging out at the house all day, burning through Dad's money. And now, they were struggling financially. My dad had the nerve to ask if I could move back in and help out, meaning help support T. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, busting my ass to make a living, while T was sitting at home doing nothing, and they wanted me to come back and take care of him? It was absurd. I told my dad no, that I wasn't going to upend my life to bail out T, and we ended the conversation on bad terms. I figured that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A few weeks later, I came home to find a letter taped to my apartment door. It was from my landlord, saying my lease had been terminated. Apparently, my dad had convinced him that I was moving back in with my family, and without bothering to check with me, my apartment had been rented out to someone else. I was furious. My dad had gone behind my back, sabotaging my living situation to force me to come home. I called him, livid, but he just brushed it off, saying that family comes first and that T needed help. I hung up on him and crashed at a friend's place for a while, until I could sort things out. It was humiliating, but I managed to find another apartment a few weeks later. I swore to myself I'd cut contact with my dad for good after that. But as you'll see, that wasn't the end of it. About 6 months later, I got another phone call. This time, it was my stepmom, Dee, and she sounded frantic. I'll never forget that call. "T's in trouble," she said, her voice shaking. "The police found drugs in the house. They're saying they were his, but if this goes to court, we could all go down for it." I didn't say anything. I didn't even know how to respond. "We need your help, she continued. "You've got to tell the police they were yours." That's when I snapped back into reality. "Wait, what? You want me to say the drugs were mine?" "It's the only way," she said, her voice firming up. "You don't have a record. You'll get off with a slap on the wrist, maybe some community service. But T, he can't handle this. If he gets charged, he could go to prison." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They wanted me to lie to the police, take the fall for T, to keep him out of prison. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. All the years of being second best, of being used and discarded when it was convenient for them, came flooding back. "No," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I'm not going to do that. T messed up, and he needs to face the consequences." She didn't take it well. "After everything we've done for you," she spat, her tone turning cold. "You can't even help your family?" I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured they'd realize that I wasn't going to bail them out and deal with the mess themselves. But I was wrong. Again. The next few days were quiet, but then weird things started happening. Friends of mine began asking why they were hearing that I was involved in drugs. One of my coworkers pulled me aside, saying he'd heard rumors I'd been in trouble with the law. It didn't take long for me to figure out what was going on. My dad and Dee were spreading lies about me. They were telling the family, and apparently anyone else who'd listen, that I was the one responsible for the drugs, that I had gotten T into trouble, that I had been involved in drug dealing and was just trying to cover my tracks. They were trying to ruin my reputation so that I'd have no choice but to take the fall for T. I was furious. The one thing I'd been trying to do was distance myself from their mess, and now they were dragging me down with them. I confronted my dad over the phone, demanding to know why they were spreading lies about me. "We need you to do this, he said, his voice calm like he was asking me to pick up some groceries, not ruin my life. "You're stronger than T. You've always been able to handle more. He can't go to prison. He won't survive it. I'm not lying for him. I shot back. He made his choices. He needs to face the consequences. And if you don't stop spreading these lies, I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. There was a pause on the other end. You're making a mistake, my dad finally said, his voice low and threatening. You don't know what you're up against. I hung up, shaking with anger. I knew I couldn't just sit back and let them ruin my life. So I started gathering evidence. I saved all the text messages from Dee, recorded phone calls, and even collected statements from friends who had heard the rumors. I wasn't about to let them get away with this. Then I went public. I reached out to every family member I could think of, explained the situation, and showed them the proof. I made it clear that I wasn't involved in any of the drug stuff, that my dad and Dee were trying to manipulate me into taking the fall for T. I even went to a lawyer to see what my options were in case they tried to escalate things legally. Most of my family was shocked. Some didn't believe me at first, but once they saw the evidence, they realized just how deep the manipulation went. Word spread quickly, and soon the entire family knew the truth. My dad and Dee didn't take it well. They tried to play the victim, claiming I was turning the family against them and that I was being selfish. But it didn't matter. They couldn't hide behind their lies anymore. Enough people had seen the truth, and their little parade was crumbling. As for T, the cops figured out pretty quickly that the drugs were his. He was arrested, and last I heard, he's facing serious jail time. It's ironic, really. After everything my dad and Dee did to protect him, he still ended up paying the price for his actions, and they lost almost everything in the process. Most of the family cut ties with them after that. Dad lost his job when word got out about the drug case, and Dee's reputation in the community took a massive hit. They've tried reaching out to me. A few times since everything went down. Calls, texts, even letters. At first, they played the guilt card, sending messages like, "We're still your family," and this has all been a huge misunderstanding. When that didn't work, they shifted to desperation, begging me to meet with them, saying we could work things out. They even went so far as to tell me that T had learned his lesson and that they needed me to help smooth things over with the rest of the family. I ignored all of it. Every single message, every attempt to pull me back into their mess, I shut down. After all they'd done, after the length they went to in order to protect T and destroy me in the process, there was no way I was going back to them. Not this time. It wasn't easy, though. I won't pretend cutting them out didn't hurt. As messed up as things were, they were still my family, and a part of me kept hoping, irrationally, that maybe they'd finally admit they were wrong, that they'd apologize, and make things right. But that apology never came. They couldn't admit their golden child had failed them, and they sure as hell couldn't admit that they treated me like a disposable backup plan my entire life. After the truth came out, I felt a mix of vindication and emptiness. On one hand, I was relieved. I had exposed their lies, cleared my name, and finally stood up for myself after years of being their doormat. But on the other hand, I'd lost my dad. The man who was supposed to be my protector had turned into the person who tried to ruin me. There's no way to come back from that. It wasn't just about T anymore. It was about how little I'd meant to them all along. As for T, he got exactly what was coming to him. It took a few months, but he was officially charged with possession with intent to distribute, and the case against him was airtight. There was no way out. The last I heard, he'd taken a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence, but he's still looking at a few years in prison. The irony of it all? My dad and Dee bent over backward trying to protect him, and yet he still ended up in exactly the place they feared the most. They sacrificed their relationship with me, their reputations, and their standing in the family for him. And for what? T's going to prison, and they're left with nothing. The rest of the family distanced themselves from my dad and Dee after everything came to light. A few of my relatives reached out to me, offering their support, apologizing for believing the lies in the first place. It was nice to know I wasn't completely alone in this, but the damage was done. Some relationships were strained beyond repair. Even though they knew the truth now, the The fact that so many of them had believed the worst about me without asking questions, that stung. Trust doesn't just magically rebuild itself. I moved on, slowly but surely. I focused on my job, on rebuilding my life without them. I found a new place to live, far away from where I grew up, and started fresh. I cut off all contact with my dad, D, and T, and honestly, I've never felt more free. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more guilt. I didn't realize how much of a weight they had been on me until I finally let them go for good. Of course, my dad and Dee didn't make that easy. They tried to stir up more drama with the rest of the family, painting themselves as victims, claiming I'd turned everyone against them out of spite. But by then, most people saw through their act. The evidence was undeniable. And with T behind bars, their house of cards had finally collapsed. I won't lie and say everything's perfect now. There are days when I still wonder how things might have been if my dad had treated me differently, if he'd seen me as more than just a backup plan. But those thoughts don't stick around long. I know better now. Some people aren't meant to stay in your life, even if they're family, especially if they're family. The hardest part of all this? Realizing I was worth more than they ever gave me credit for. My whole life, I'd been bending over backward, trying to prove to my dad that I was good enough, that I deserved the same love and respect that he got. But in the end, it wasn't about me at all. It was about them. Their need to protect their perfect image, their golden child, no matter the cost. And I wasn't willing to pay that price anymore. So now, here I am. I've got my life back, free from their toxicity, and I'm moving forward. I've learned to be my own support system, to rely on the friends and family who truly care about me. It's not easy rebuilding your life after your own family tries to tear it apart, but it's possible, and it's worth it. As for my dad, D and T, I don't think about them much anymore. Last I heard, they were struggling to keep their heads above water. The legal fees for T's case drained whatever savings they had left. And my dad's job prospects aren't looking great after his employer found out about the whole drug scandal. They've been left with the fallout of their own choices, and I've washed my hands of it. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that you can't control how people treat you, but you can control how you respond. My dad and Dee made their choice when they decided to protect T at all costs, and I made mine when I chose to stand up for myself and walk away. In the end, I realized that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, who support you, without asking you to sacrifice yourself for their mistakes. It's about the people who love you for who you are, not what you can do for them. And for the first time in my life, I'm finally surrounding myself with the kind of people who actually care. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.
My dad tried to force me out of my own house for my pregnant stepsister. This time, I stood up to him. I'm a 34-year-old guy dealing with some serious family drama. My self-centered, mostly absent dad, 62, recently found out how much I'm making at my new job, and suddenly he's trying to kick me out of my own house, all in the name of family. Here's the deal. My stepsister, Karen, 29, got herself pregnant, and between her questionable career choices as an escort and OnlyFans model, she's having trouble finding a place to live. Now my dad thinks he's found the perfect solution. Yes, it's me. He wants me to give up my house and my hard-earned money to help my stepsister, all because she's made some questionable life choices. The irony. This is the same dad who wanted nothing to do with me growing up. But now that he's discovered I've got a nice house and a good income, he's suddenly all about how we're blood and family. My dad openly rejected any responsibility for me multiple times when I was growing up. But now he's not only trying to remind me that he's my father, he's also pushing me to strengthen my bonds with his wife and her daughter. Sure, Karen is technically my half-sister, but I was shipped off to boarding school so early that we never really formed any kind of connection. Looking back, I'm kind of glad we didn't, because what I've learned about her lately has been pretty disappointing. I want to be clear. I'm just venting here. These are my thoughts and feelings, and you might not agree with them, but I need to get this off my chest. I don't really have anyone else to talk to about this. Karen is my half-sister. She's doing things that make my dad proud, though I'm pretty sure he doesn't know the whole story. She works as an escort and has an unsuccessful OnlyFans account. Dad calls her his pride and joy, completely oblivious to what she actually does for a living. I'm not super conservative, but I do have my principles, and I'm focused on my career. I date when I have time, trying to get to know women properly. Sometimes there's a connection, but things don't work out because of distance or schedules. Other times, there's just no chemistry. I prefer not to have casual hookups. I'm waiting for the right person. Having a high body count isn't something I'm interested in. That's just my personal choice. My stepsister sees things differently. She's lost count of her partners, and while I try not to judge, I worry about her safety as an escort. Some clients can be dangerous. Plus, she posts explicit content online, though it doesn't seem to bring in much money. I found out about this from a friend who she'd propositioned after they went for drinks. He showed me her page after telling me she'd sent him the link. He claims he didn't know she was my sister when they went out. I'm not sure if I believe him, but whatever. She's constantly broke and hitting up Dad for money, so I assume her online ventures aren't very successful. I've seen her getting into cars with older men and sneaking back into the house at odd hours. I noticed this during my college breaks, though I'm not sure if she's still doing it. Either way, I want nothing to do with it. I have a respectable job that I've worked hard for, even though I haven't lived much with my new family. Since Dad was always eager to send me away, I've seen enough of Karen to know she takes after her mother, Susan, 58. Susan seems to think she was some kind of celebrity in her prime. She used to be a flight attendant and was attractive enough to catch the eye of guys like my dad. Now she's your typical Botoxed Karen with claws for nails who runs a neighborhood daycare. How parents trust their kids with those talents is beyond me. Susan's got an opinion about everything and loves stirring up drama in other people's lives. Her voice is like nails on a chalkboard, and she's got more plastic in her than a Tupperware factory. She's about as genuine as a $3 bill. She's always had my dad wrapped around her finger, and I'm pretty sure she's the main reason he shipped me off to boarding school when I was 8. She didn't want to deal with raising someone else's kid. Now about my dad, he's really the root of all this drama. He's got this attitude that everything he does is justified because he's lived a whole life, so he supposedly knows better. He's told me straight up that he regrets having me because I'm nothing like him. Honestly, thank God for that. My mom was different. She was strong and knew what mattered in life. She took good care of my dad until things fell apart. Even then, she always told me that Dad wasn't a bad person, just different. She'd say that no matter what happened, he'd always be my dad, and I shouldn't forget that. She was too good of a person to poison my mind against him, but I'm sure he was just as unbearable to her as he is now. They separated and got divorced when I was 4. 2 months later, Dad married Susan. They had Karen when I was 5, and then my mom died in a car crash. She was coming to pick me up from school. She was always on time, except for that one day. She was just 10 minutes late, but to a kid waiting, it felt like hours. Some drunk driver hit her at an intersection. He survived. She didn't. I waited at school for 2 hours before anyone came to get me. When Dad finally showed up, I remember him looking at Susan with this annoyed expression, asking what they should do with me. Her response? Your kid, your problem. Well, right back at you, Dad. Now you can't just show up and expect me to take care of your spoiled kid. I've worked my butt off since I was 15. After boarding school, I went to college, only coming home for holidays. So basically, I've been on my own since I was 8. I've put in serious effort to get where I am, and I recently bought my first house. It's nothing fancy, but it's way better than the apartment I was sharing with friends. Even though I'm not exactly close with my family, I figured I should include them in this milestone moment. So I invited them to my housewarming party. Man, you should have seen my dad's face. He looked straight up jealous, asking all these pointed questions about the furniture, the architect, and the interior designer. Every answer I gave was met with some snarky comment, like I wouldn't know. You never bothered telling me. He kept trying to make our rocky relationship obvious in front of everyone, even my boss. A week later, Dad called me saying he needed to meet urgently. I was swamped at work with this complex project, but I agreed anyway. When I got home, I found Susan and Karen in the living room. Susan looked angry as usual, and Karen, with red, puffy eyes, gave me the side eye. Dad was in the kitchen pulling beers from the fridge. He offered me one, which I politely turned down, wondering what bomb he was about to drop. When I asked what this was about, he got all high and mighty, asking if I'd finally started giving a damn about us. Then he insisted we all move to the living room for some kind of family meeting. I sat across from them, feeling like I was about to face a firing squad. Dad put his beer down and hit me with this gem. "Are you blind?" When I didn't respond, he went on about how I must either be blind or choose not to see what's happening around me. According to him, I'd gotten too proud with my new house and was ignoring the people who actually mean something. Finally, after all this buildup, they dropped a bomb. Karen was pregnant. I started to congratulate her, but before I could get the words out, she burst into tears. Susan hugged her while Dad explained that the father had bailed as soon as he found out about the baby. Karen wanted to keep it, and apparently, that's where I came in. My first question was whether she could afford it, which earned me death glares from both Karen and Susan. I honestly meant well. I was already thinking maybe they needed help with money, which I was willing to consider. But then Dad moved to sit next to me. And that's when things went off the rails. He started this whole speech about being a good father to his girl, and how my mother must not have taught me how to be a good brother, but that brothers should give their lives for their sister's comfort. I almost laughed out loud. Sure, I could help financially, but die for her? Come on. When I asked what exactly they wanted from me, Dad smiled and patted my back like I was finally getting it. But what came next was absolutely insane. "You're giving your house to Karen." "No, I'm not," I said immediately. Dad frowned. "Why not?" I told him I could help with some money, maybe even let her stay in a room rent-free until she got back on her feet. But Dad jumped up, shouting that this wasn't enough. He wanted me to not only give her the entire house, but also move out and buy another place for myself. Oh, and by the way, I'd still be responsible for all the bills and maintenance, since Karen couldn't afford them while pregnant and unemployed. Hell no. I tried to stay respectful, but I'd had enough. I got up and told them this wasn't happening, then left. I learned that healthy relationships require boundaries, honesty, and mutual respect. Success earned through hard work should be protected, and we shouldn't let guilt or manipulation force us into decisions that compromise our values or well-being.
My ex forged evidence to force me sign over my house. So I helped her find new housing in jail. I'm 29. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew each other's business taught me the value of reputation and standing up for what's right. My parents, now in their early 60s, always told me that when someone tries to take what's yours, you've got to stand your ground. I just never expected to need that advice because of someone I once loved. The house in question wasn't just any property. It was my late Uncle Jack's place, a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home in an older neighborhood. Uncle Jack was more than just a relative. He was my mentor, the person who taught me how to fix cars, who listened when I was struggling in high school, who showed me what it meant to be a man of integrity. When he passed away 3 years ago, he left me the house. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. I've been slowly renovating it, room by room, whenever I had spare time and money. The kitchen still had its original 1980s cabinets, and the bathroom needed updating, but every imperfection told a story. I had plans to fix it all up eventually, doing most of the work myself, just like Uncle Jack would have wanted. A couple of years back, I met Kelly at my friend Mike's summer barbecue 2 years ago. She was new in town, working as a real estate agent, and had this magnetic energy about her. She could light up a room with her smile and had a way of making you feel like the most interesting person in the world. We hit it off immediately, bonding over classic cars, though I later realized she was just pretending to be interested in late-night takeout adventures. At first, everything was perfect. She was spontaneous, always ready for an adventure. We'd take random road trips on weekends, try new restaurants, and spend hours talking about everything and nothing. My parents warned me I was moving too fast, but I was too caught up in the whirlwind to listen. Looking back, the warning signs were there from the beginning. It started with subtle comments about money. She'd joke about only dating guys who could provide her with financial security, but her tone always felt a bit too serious. Then came the demands for expensive gifts, designer bags, shoes, jewelry. When I couldn't or wouldn't buy them, she'd give me the silent treatment for days. My friend started noticing things. He pulled me aside at his New Year's party and told me Kelly had been asking weird questions about my house's value and whether I owned it outright. I brushed it off at the time, but that should have been my wake-up call. About a year into dating, Kelly started practically living in my house without any real discussion. She brought over her furniture bit by bit, rearranging my stuff without asking. The final straw was when she threw out my old college couch, the one Uncle Jack had helped me move into my first apartment. She claimed it was ugly and replaced it with some secondhand piece from her friend, but that couch held memories I couldn't replace. Then came the constant hints about marriage, but they weren't about love or building a life together. They were always focused on combining assets, putting both our names on the house deed, joining our finances. When I resisted, she'd manipulate me with guilt trips about not loving her enough to make her feel secure. Everything exploded 6 months ago when Kelly demanded I sell the house and move somewhere more suitable. She had her eye on a McMansion in a new development, something way beyond my means and interest. When I refused, she showed her true colors, calling me cheap and unambitious. After a 3-day silent treatment, she came back acting sweet, but her real motive became clear. She wanted her name on my house deed. That's when I finally saw through everything. I ended it, and she left, but not before giving me this unsettling smirk that should have warned me what was coming. 2 months after our breakup, Kelly showed up at my door with an ultimatum: sign over the house to her, or she'd file false abuse charges against me. She claimed she'd earned the house by spending time with me, as if relationships were some kind of real estate transaction. When I refused, she laid out her plan in chilling detail. She had already started building her case. She'd taken photos of old bruises from her kickboxing classes, planning to claim they were from me. She had a timeline written out of alleged incidents, carefully crafted to match times when I wasn't at work and wouldn't have solid alibis. She'd even started telling mutual friends about how controlling I was, laying groundwork for her story. That night, I told my parents everything. My mom was terrified, but my dad's anger gave me strength. You fight this, he said. You fight it smart, and you fight it hard. I found a lawyer through a family friend, and we started building our defense before Kelly could even file her false claims. I installed security cameras with audio recording capabilities around my property, completely legal in our state since it was my property and I was aware of the recording. I bought a small voice recorder to carry with me and documented every interaction. I kept every text, every email, every voicemail where she'd hinted at her plans. Kelly's attempts to forge evidence became increasingly desperate. She created fake text messages using an app that mimicked my phone number, making it look like I was sending threatening messages. She took photos of herself in my neighborhood, claiming I was stalking her. She even tried to doctor timestamps on old photos to support her timeline of alleged abuse. But she made mistakes. The fake texts had grammatical errors I would never make. The doctored photos had metadata that didn't match her claims. Her carefully crafted timeline fell apart when compared to my work records and security camera footage. When Kelly finally filed her police report, I was ready. She claimed I had physically abused her multiple times, providing dates and locations. But I had evidence for every single allegation. Security footage showing I wasn't home when she claimed certain incidents occurred. Work records proving I was on shift during other alleged times. Witnesses who could verify my whereabouts. Text messages from those same dates showing her making plans with friends, contradicting her claims of being injured. The detectives quickly saw through her story. The inconsistencies were glaring. and her evidence didn't hold up to scrutiny. But she wasn't done yet. Kelly's next move was to forge a legal letter, supposedly from an attorney, demanding I settle our property dispute out of court. The letter was laughably amateur, wrong letterhead, no bar number, basic legal terms misused. My attorney confirmed it was fake, and we added forgery to her growing list of crimes. She started showing up at my parents' house, creating scenes and claiming to be the victim. My mother was so stressed she could barely sleep. But each time Kelly acted out, she just gave us more evidence of her true nature. After months of investigation, the prosecutor had enough evidence to charge Kelly with filing a false report, attempted extortion, and forgery. The case was solid. Multiple recorded instances of her threatening to file false charges if I didn't give her my house. Evidence of her forging legal documents. Proof that she had fabricated evidence for her abuse claims. Witnesses who could testify to her previous statements about wanting my house. Security footage contradicting her timeline of events. Watching her in court, trying to play the victim while the evidence mounted against her, was surreal. Her lawyer tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, but the judge wasn't buying it. When she realized she was cornered, she tried to claim mental health issues, but the evidence of premeditation was too strong. Kelly ended up pleading guilty to forgery and filing a false report. The judge wasn't lenient. She got actual jail time. As my dad said, she wanted a free house so bad. She got one, courtesy of the state. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Word spread through our small town quickly. Some people were shocked. Others said they'd always sensed something off about her. Her reputation as a fun, outgoing person was replaced by the truth. She was a manipulative person who would destroy someone's life for property. Even from jail, she tried to manipulate me, sending letters begging for support for early parole. I tore them up. She'd shown no mercy when trying to steal my home and destroy my life. I owed her nothing. These days, I'm focused on healing and moving forward. I'm throwing myself into work at the auto shop and finally finishing those house renovations I'd planned. The kitchen is getting new cabinets, and I'm thinking about adding a deck out back, something Uncle Jack and I had talked about before he passed. Dating isn't a priority right now. When you've seen how quickly someone can turn from the love of your life into your worst nightmare, it takes time to trust again. But I'm not bitter, just wiser. The house means more to me than ever now. It's not just Uncle Jack's legacy anymore. It's a symbol of standing up for what's right, of fighting back against manipulation and lies. Every time I walk through the front door, I'm reminded that some things are worth fighting for. I learned that you have to be proactive in protecting yourself, that evidence is your best friend, and that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Most importantly, I learned that my parents were right. You've got to stand your ground when someone tries to take what's yours. Kelly's serving her sentence now, and I'm free to live my life. Sometimes I still can't believe how close I came to losing everything, but I'm grateful for the support system that helped me fight back. My parents, my friends, my lawyer, even the detectives who saw through her lies. They all played a part in making sure justice was served. The whole experience taught me something about strength I never knew I had. When someone threatens everything you hold dear, you find out what you're made of. I'm just glad I found out I was made of stronger stuff than Kelly bargained for. As for the house, it's still a work in progress, just like me. But that's okay. Some things take time to get right, and some battles are worth fighting. At least now I can work on it in peace, knowing it's mine, truly mine, and that no one can take it away from me. My entitled sister got arrested on our family vacation. Now, my parents finally recognized her manipulation. I'm 23 now, and my sister Lisa is 18. I never thought I'd be writing this story, but recent events have forced me to confront the complex dynamics that have shaped my family for the past 2 decades. To understand our story, you need to know that before Lisa was born, our mother suffered a devastating miscarriage that left deep emotional scars on both our parents. When Lisa came along a few years later, she was seen as their miracle child, a beacon of hope that helped heal their profound loss. From the beginning, Lisa was placed on a pedestal. Our parents showered her with endless attention and affection, making her the undisputed center of our family universe. Let me be clear, I loved my sister when we were children. It's just I slowly recognized that Lisa had an uncanny talent for manipulation that none of my family members could notice. One incident stands out vividly in my memory. On my birthday, our grandparents gave me a beautiful antique pocket watch, a cherished family heirloom. "Can I have it?" Lisa demanded immediately, her eyes fixed on the gleaming watch. "No, Lisa, it's my birthday present," I replied, clutching it protectively. "But we're supposed to share everything," she whined, turning to our parents. "Mom, Dad, tell her she has to share." Our parents exchanged uncomfortable looks. "Sweetie," Mom said gently to Lisa, "this is a special gift from your grandparents to your sister." Lisa's face darkened, but she said nothing more. That night, knowing my intense fear of spiders, she placed one inside my pillowcase. I woke up screaming as I felt it crawling on my skin. While my parents rushed in concerned, Lisa played the part of the worried sister perfectly. Later, when we were alone, she cornered me in the hallway. "Did you enjoy my little gift?" she asked with that unsettling smile I'd come to dread. "You put that spider in my bed?" I whispered, still shaking. "How could you?" She leaned in close, her voice eerily calm. "Next time you'll learn to share, won't you?" Then she skipped away, humming, showing absolutely no remorse. The casual way she'd admitted it chilled me to my core. Another painful memory involves my high school crush, Mark. I'd finally worked up the courage to invite him over to watch a movie. I'd spent hours choosing the perfect outfit, feeling excited and nervous. But as soon as Mark arrived, Lisa accidentally spilled juice all over my dress and laughed. While I changed clothes, mortified, she proceeded to tell Mark embarrassing stories from my childhood. She refused to leave us alone during the movie, and before Mark left, she told him he could do much better than me. He never spoke to me again after that day. Over the years, I tried countless times to tell my parents about Lisa's behavior, but they always dismissed it as typical sibling rivalry or childish pranks. They couldn't or wouldn't see past their image of their perfect miracle child. Eventually, I stopped trying to make them understand and focused instead on my studies, which became my ticket to freedom when I got accepted to a good college. College gave me the space I desperately needed, but coming home for breaks was always tense. Lisa made it clear she resented my presence, refusing to sit near me at meals, interrupting whenever I spoke to our parents, and deliberately damaging or losing my belongings when she borrowed them. My parents continued to brush off my concerns, urging us to get along. As a result, I began avoiding coming home. I started spending breaks with friends' families instead, and my parents didn't seem to mind. They saw it as me being independent. After high school, Lisa's grades weren't good enough for a regular college, so she enrolled in community college and continued living at home. Meanwhile, I built a successful career at a multinational corporation in San Francisco, maintaining minimal contact with my family and none with Lisa. Everything changed when my father had a near-fatal heart attack. I immediately flew home when my mother called, and since my job allowed remote work, I stayed to help during his recovery. My father's brush with death made him want to spend more time as a family, and he suggested we all go on vacation together. Despite my reservations, I agreed, knowing how important it was to him. However, when we arrived at the airport, we discovered my ticket had been mysteriously canceled, while everyone else's remained intact. As I stood there trying to understand what happened, I caught Lisa's familiar smirk, the same one she'd worn countless times after successfully pulling off one of her schemes. I knew immediately she had canceled my ticket, probably using our father's computer. When I confronted her, my parents once again jumped to her defense, dismissing it as an airline error and telling me to stop being jealous of my sister. They seemed almost relieved when I suggested they continue the vacation without me, barely putting up a token protest before agreeing. I returned to San Francisco trying to make the best of my time off while they video called to show me how much fun they were having without me. The truth finally came to light a few days into their vacation when my mother called in distress. My father's essential heart medications had been disappearing daily, putting his health at serious risk in a foreign country where they weren't sure they could get replacements. While looking for sunscreen in Lisa's hotel room, my mother discovered all the missing medications hidden in Lisa's bedside table. This shocking discovery was just the beginning. When my parents confronted Lisa, she exploded. "How dare you go through my things?" she shrieked, pacing the hotel room like a caged animal. Lisa screamed, "You should never have invited her on this trip. This was supposed to be our time." "Lisa, honey, please calm down," Mom pleaded. "We're worried about you." "Worried? Now you're worried?" Lisa laughed hysterically. "If you don't cut her out of your lives completely, I'll make you both sorry. I'll teach you what happens when you choose her over me." She grabbed the lamp and hurled it against the wall. The crash brought hotel security running, and when they tried to intervene, Lisa turned on them too. "Get your hands off me," she screamed at the officers who arrived minutes later. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my parents are?" Her tantrum became so violent that they had no choice but to arrest her, even as she continued hurling threats and insults. But Lisa wasn't done. After her release, my parents had then tried to reschedule their flight, but they discovered their passports and wallets were missing. She had hidden them to prevent them from leaving. For the first time, my parents were seeing Lisa as she truly was, and they were devastated. My mother, who had defended Lisa for so many years, called me in tears, begging for help. I arranged to send them money through Western Union, but they still needed to find their passports to get home. After threatening to call the authorities again, Lisa revealed where she'd hidden the passports. Once home, my parents told her to move out, unable to trust her after she had endangered my father's health. This led to another explosive confrontation where Lisa revealed the depth of her jealousy, insisting they should disown me because she was more than enough for both of them. She threatened to make false allegations of child neglect if they forced her to leave, knowing such accusations could damage their reputation as respected doctors in the community. The situation continued to deteriorate. Lisa started breaking dishes when angry, hiding their car keys to prevent them from going to work, and having violent tantrums when she didn't get her way. The breaking point came when she threatened our parents with a knife during an argument. They finally called the police, and Lisa was arrested for assault. With Lisa in custody, our parents consulted an attorney and began the formal eviction process. Though they didn't want to press charges, they knew they needed legal protection to remove her from their home. The court granted an eviction order, giving Lisa a deadline to leave the property. My parents have since come to stay with me in San Francisco, taking time to process everything that's happened. Last night, over dinner in my apartment, they finally opened up about their regret eve. With tears in their eyes, they apologized for dismissing my concerns all these years and admitted they had been blind to Lisa's true nature. The pain of realizing how their miracle child had manipulated them and how their favoritism had hurt me was evident in their voices. While I appreciate their acknowledgement and apology, I told them it would take time to rebuild our trust. We're taking small steps forward, enjoying simple moments together as we explore San Francisco and have honest conversations about our family's past and future. As for Lisa, she's currently staying with friends. Despite everything, my parents still feel responsible for her and want to explore the possibility of getting her mental health support. Though as an adult, she'll need to agree to any evaluation or treatment. They plan to meet with her in a public place once they return home, hoping to have a calm discussion about the way forward. Our story isn't over, and there's still much healing to be done. But for the first time in years, we're facing our family's issues with honesty and hope. While I can't forget the past, I'm cautiously optimistic about building a healthier future together, even if that future looks very different from what any of us imagined. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.